Hello and welcome to Like a Native Speaker. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about the flap T. So the flap T is a particular pronunciation of the T sound. It's called the flap T because the tongue very lightly touches the roof of the mouth, kind of like a bird flapping its wings. A normal T sound has strong contact between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. T, T, T. The flap T has very light contact with the roof of the mouth. It just lightly touches. You can hear it in words like water, or better, or little. To English speakers, this flap T actually sounds more like a D sound. Water, little. But perhaps to you, it might sound more like an R, water, little. Especially Spanish, Korean, and some Japanese speakers will hear it almost like an R sound. But to a native English speaker, it sounds like a soft D. Now, this flap T is basically an unstressed T. It's used to increase the flow and smoothness of sentences and words. And this is why the flap T generally occurs after stressed vowels. The stress sound comes before, so the T is unstressed. You can see this in my earlier examples. Water, better, little. The T is in an unstressed syllable, so the T becomes unstressed. It becomes the flap. If you notice, if the T is in a stressed syllable, attention, hotel, we don't have the flap. It's the normal T sound. You can also find the flap T at the end of a word if the next word begins with a vowel sound. My favorite example is shut up, shut up. Another example is here it is, here it is. Or perhaps the most famous example for most of you would be let it go, let it go. So the flap T is in unstressed syllables when the stress is before T. But of course, this is English, so there are always exceptions. For example, the word whatever, whatever, the stress is actually on the syllable with T, but we still make that flap sound. I don't really know why, but whatever. There are, of course, some words that should have the flap T, but don't. Words like military, politics, detail, iTunes. Each of these words have a stressed syllable before the T, but we don't unstress the T. Again, why we do that? Whatever. I do need to point out that this flap T is not always necessary for being understood in English. If you don't use the flap T, then most of the time native speakers will understand what you're talking about. You do sound more formal and very careful in your pronunciation, but it's not really a bad thing. However, almost all native speakers use this flap T. It's most common in North America, but you do still see it in Australia and Europe as well. So I recommend practicing this flap T if you want to sound like a native speaker, or at least practice listening to it if you want to listen like a native speaker. As always, if you have any questions or comments, put them below. I'll see you next time and keep learning.